Hey, amazing viewers! I love connecting with all of you from around the world. Stay with me until the end, because this story is packed with surprises that will leave you inspired and thinking differently. Today's twist is something no one saw coming. And if it's your first time here, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Show some love by liking the video, and don't forget to share it with your friends. It was a cold winter morning in Cincinnati, the kind that makes you pull your coat tighter and keep your head down against the wind. The city streets were unusually quiet, with only a few brave souls hurrying by, their breaths visible in the frigid air. The distant hum of cars and the low whistle of the wind were the only sounds, but for Sergeant Henry H.R.I. Kessler, it all faded into the background. He had just returned home from deployment a few days ago, trying to piece together the fragments of his civilian life, but something felt off. Maybe it was the silence in his apartment, the absence of the chatter of soldiers, or the weight of memories that lingered even when he tried to shut them out. Every step he took felt like he was walking through thick fog, unsure of what came next. He couldn't shake the unease in his chest, the feeling that something, or someone, was missing. As he walked through the city, the old streets felt unfamiliar, as if they had been changed while he was away. And that's when he saw it. There, lying abandoned on the cold pavement, was a dog. The dog wasn't just any dog. It was a German shepherd. But this wasn't just any dog either. H.R.I. froze, his heart skipping a beat. The dog was in bad shape. Its fur was matted with dirt, its ribs visibly protruding from its thin body. The once proud stance of a soldier's companion was gone. The dog lay there, its eyes glazed and lifeless, barely breathing. People walked by without even glancing at it. To them, it was just another stray, a forgotten animal in the harsh winter. But to H.R.I., this was something far more than a random dog. It was a bond, a connection forged in the fires of war. The scar above the dog's right eye stood out, and suddenly, H.R.I. felt a wave of nausea rise in his throat. The dog's name flashed into his mind. FCO, his partner, his brother. H.R.I.'s breath caught in his chest as he stumbled forward, his mind racing. He remembered the way FCO had charged into danger, never hesitating, always willing to put himself between H.R.I. and harm. The way his sharp eyes never missed a detail in the heat of battle. And now, here he was, lying broken and abandoned in a city that didn't even care. He dropped to his knees in front of FCO, his voice shaking as he whispered, "FCO, it's me, buddy." For a moment, there was nothing. No reaction. The dog didn't move, didn't acknowledge him at all. The air around them seemed to thicken with sorrow, and H.R.I.'s chest tightened. He felt like he was drowning in the weight of the past. But then, just as he thought his heart might shatter from the overwhelming grief, something changed. A flicker of recognition appeared in FCO's dull eyes. The tail, once so full of energy, gave the faintest twitch. It was barely noticeable, but to H.R.I., it was everything. It was a sign. His partner was still alive, still fighting to hold on. Just then, a voice broke the moment. "You know this dog." H.R.I. snapped his head around, his heart pounding. Behind him stood an older man, his white hair disheveled, and his face weathered, his dark eyes filled with something that looked like regret. He clutched a worn leash, holding onto the dog like it was the last piece of something valuable. The old man's words were slow, almost pained. I know him too. He was my partner once." H.R.I.'s heart skipped a beat, his pulse racing. "He was my partner too," he said, voice cracking as he looked back at FCO. This was his brother in arms, his best friend. And now, FCO was barely holding on. The old man sighed, a deep, sorrowful breath, before speaking again. "You need to know what happened to him, before it's too late." The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. H.R.I.'s mind raced. What had happened to FCO? Why was he here, abandoned and broken? There was so much to uncover, but time was running out. The dog that had been his steadfast companion, who had given everything for him, was now a shadow of his former self. But what was worse, what HRI wasn't prepared for, was what he was about to learn. A truth that would shatter everything he believed about the system, about loyalty, and about justice. This was just the beginning of a journey that would change everything. HRI could hardly comprehend what he was hearing. The old man's words echoed in his mind like a hammer striking the anvil. Before it's too late, he looked back down at FCO, his heart breaking all over again. This dog had saved his life countless times. They had shared a bond forged in blood and fire, a connection that could never be broken. But now, FCO lay there, barely breathing, abandoned and forgotten by the very system that had once called them heroes. "Tell me," HRI said, his voice low and filled with an intensity he hadn't felt in years. The military edge had returned, cold and sharp. What happened to him? The old man shifted uncomfortably, his hands trembling as he gripped the leash tighter. The hesitation was unbearable. But HRI didn't have time for games, not now. His eyes locked with the old man's. He wasn't going to let this slide. The old man sighed heavily, a weight pressing on his chest. After his last mission, he said, voice ragged, they said he was unfit for service. No ceremony, no thanks. They put him through paperwork and tossed him aside. HRI's blood ran cold. They sold him. His voice cracked as the words left his lips. The thought was almost too much to bear. How could the military, his military, treat a living, breathing partner like that? He had seen countless men and women return from missions broken, but he never expected this, never thought he would hear such a betrayal. The old man nodded slowly, his eyes glistening with something that looked like regret, but there was no comfort to be found in it. A private security firm, he continued. They bought him, and they worked him like a machine. Overworked him, starved him, pushed him to the edge. When he couldn't perform anymore, they just dumped him. HRI's fists clenched at his sides, his knuckles turning white. Dumped him. The words burned through his mind like acid. This wasn't just any soldier. They had done this to SCO, the dog who had given his all in battle. The dog who had saved his life more times than he could count. And now he was here, lying on the cold pavement, abandoned as if he were nothing. The rage that had been simmering beneath the surface began to boil over. His heart pounded in his chest, and the pressure in his head made it hard to think. But one question burned through the storm of emotions. Who did this to him? Who bought him? The old man looked away, his face pale and drawn. He hesitated, like he was afraid to speak the name. But HRI was done with the silence. He wasn't going to let FCO slip away, not without a fight. The old man finally spoke, his voice barely a whisper. Baldwin Security. HRI's mind snapped into focus. He had never heard of them, but it didn't matter. What mattered now was that they had done this to SCO. They had used him, broken him, and discarded him like yesterday's trash. Without a second thought, HRI turned and gently scooped FCO into his arms. The dog was too weak to resist, his body frail and limp. HRI could feel the heat of his own anger rising with every step he took toward the old man's truck. Baldwin Security, he thought, the name ringing in his head. He wasn't going to let this go. FCO deserved justice, and HRI wasn't about to let the people who had abandoned his best friend get away with it. As he climbed into the truck, cradling FCO close, the weight of the situation hit him like a ton of bricks. Who could do this to a dog? FCO had been a hero, a warrior, and yet here he was, reduced to this fragile, broken thing. HRI's heart clenched in his chest. He didn't care about the rules anymore. He didn't care about the consequences. All that mattered was getting FCO the help he needed, and making sure Baldwin Security paid for what they had done. With every mile that passed, the fire of determination burned hotter inside him. But there was no time to waste. He needed to get FCO help, and he needed to get answers. Answers that only Baldwin Security could provide. But deep down, HRI knew that this was just the beginning. There was a battle ahead of him. One that wasn't just about saving his dog, but about fighting for every K-9 who had ever served and been discarded. And he wasn't going to stop until the truth came out. HRI's heart raced as he sat outside the emergency vet clinic, the cold air biting at his skin, his mind a battlefield of emotions. FCO was inside, fighting for his life, but all HRI could do was wait. The silence around him was deafening, each second dragging like an eternity. His thoughts kept returning to Baldwin Security. The name burned into his mind. They were the ones who had done this. They had taken FCO, broken him, and left him to die in a city that had no idea what kind of hero had been abandoned on its streets. But this wasn't just about FCO anymore. It wasn't just about his pain, his suffering, or even the injustice that had been done to him. No, this was about something much larger. It was about every K-9 soldier who had ever served and been tossed aside when they were no longer useful. It was about the betrayal of a system that claimed to honor heroes, but instead discarded them when they were no longer needed. HRI's eyes burned with determination. He wouldn't let this happen again. Not on his watch. Not to his family. He looked down at his phone, the screen lighting up with a few names from his past, names of soldiers who had fought alongside him. He knew that he wasn't alone in this. There were others, men and women who understood the bond between a soldier and their K-9. They would fight with him, just as they had fought by his side in war. Together, they would make sure FCO's sacrifice, and the sacrifices of so many others, would not go unnoticed. The doors to the clinic opened, and Dr. Carter stepped out, her face unreadable. HRI's pulse quickened as he stood to meet her. He was prepared for the worst, but her words shattered him more than he ever expected. FCO made it through the night, she said softly, her eyes tired but filled with compassion. He's stable for now, but he's not out of the woods yet. His injuries, they're severe. His body has been through hell. HRI nodded, the tightness in his chest easing slightly. He made it. FCO was still here, still fighting. But it wasn't over. Not yet. Not until the people who had done this to him, and to all the K-9s like him, were held accountable. I'm going to make sure he gets the best care, HRI said, his voice firm, unwavering. And I'm going to make sure Baldwin Security never hurts another dog again. This ends now. Dr. Carter placed a hand on his shoulder, her gaze steady. I believe you, Sergeant, but you need to be careful. This isn't just a fight for one dog. It's a fight against an entire system. And sometimes, the system is a lot harder to break than you think. HRI's eyes locked onto hers, a fire burning deep within him. Then I'll break it, he said, his voice steady and filled with the weight of a promise. For FCO. For every K-9 who's ever been left behind. For every soldier who's ever had to say goodbye to their best friend. I won't let this go. The truth hit him hard, but it also ignited something powerful inside him. A drive that would push him to the ends of the earth if necessary. Because this wasn't just about revenge. This was about standing up for what was right, for the ones who couldn't speak for themselves. The ones who had given everything and received nothing in return. It was a fight for justice, for the forgotten heroes who deserved so much more than what they had been given. As HRI walked out of the clinic, his mind was made up. He wasn't going to stop until he made sure every K-9 who had been abused, neglected, or discarded was given the respect they deserved. FCO might have been his partner in war, but now, in peace, he would be the spark that ignited a movement. A movement to make sure no soldier, no hero, was ever left behind again. The road ahead would be difficult. The fight would be long. But HRI knew one thing for certain. He wasn't alone. And together, they would change the system. Together, they would make sure that FCO's story, and the stories of countless other K-9s, would never be forgotten. So the next time you see a dog, a retired K-9, or a soldier in need, remember that they're not just fighting for their country. They're fighting for each other, and we all have a responsibility to fight for them too. Because when one hero falls, we all rise to lift them up. And that is what it means to honor those who serve. This story delivers a powerful motivational message to you, emphasizing the theme of justice, loyalty, and standing up for what's right. HRI's determination to fight for FCO and all abandoned K-9s leaves you with a sense of hope, urging them to consider the importance of supporting and honoring those who serve.